So, this video is just going to be a brief introduction to the character of Mercutio to prepare you for your essay on his presentation in both the play and in the film of Romeo and Juliet. So, Mercutio has 5 key characteristics, and we're going to look at these in a bit more detail, but his 5 key characteristics are firstly that he's mercurial, and that word mercurial is obviously very similar to his name, Mercutio, and it means that he's quick to change. He views love solely as a physical act, so he values sex over love, which obviously puts him at odds with some of the other characters. He's a loyal friend, especially to Romeo, and that means that he does get himself into trouble at certain times. He's a comedic character. He's funny, and he's there to lighten some of those scenes as well. He's got lots of jokes, and we'll have a look at them in a bit more detail later. And he's violent, and this violence in his character is always just sort of bubbling under the surface. So those are those 5 key characteristics for Mercutio. Mercurial, views love solely as a physical act, he's a loyal friend, he's a comedic character, and he is violent. So let's look at that word mercurial in a bit more detail. Okay, so mercurial means, as I said before, quick to change. And that is exactly how Mercutio is. He can be 1 minute having a laugh and a joke with his friends, and then can get very, very intense and very angry and shouty. And we'll have a look at some scenes in the film and in the play that show that really easily. Mercurial is also like this word mercury, which you might have come across in science, because it's an element. That's a C, sorry. Mercury is a metal that is liquid at room temperature, and it's like the metal that goes in a thermometer. So as the thermometer gets hotter, that metal in the mercury inside the tube expands, and that's how you get the different temperatures. Now, if something expands and it gets hot, when it gets hotter, obviously it's quite a volatile element, and that also links to Mercutio's name. Okay, Shakespeare called him Mercutio to make us think of that word mercurial, which, as I said before, means quick to change, but also to make us think of the element mercury and that liquid metal that is so volatile and can be very dangerous. Both of those things really suit the character of Mercutio, as we'll see in a bit more detail. So another thing that we know about Mercutio is that rather than valuing romantic love like Romeo does, who's all about Juliet is his true love, and that's really important to him. Mercutio's not like that at all. Okay, he doesn't think about love being this romantic, love at first sight, hearts and all of that. He sees love as purely physical. It is a sexual act, and that makes him similar to the nurse. The nurse also talks about the physical act of love rather than the romantic ideal that Juliet shows. So this puts Mercutio at odds with the 2 main characters of the play, which Shakespeare's done to have as a contrast and to make their views even more obvious. Now, this links to the idea, doesn't it, that he's a foil, which we talked about when we were looking at Streetcar. So Mercutio talks about sex rather than love. He does not value this romantic ideal, which is surprising, isn't it? Because when you think Romeo and Juliet, you think romantic love, and yet one of the main characters, and probably argue the most memorable character, absolutely thinks that's rubbish. So, the 3rd characteristic that we mentioned of Mercutio is that he's a loyal friend. Now, he really, really does love Romeo. And he says that a couple of times throughout the play, but there's a lot of debate over what kind of love this is. Lots of people think that this is a kind of reference to him having homosexual feelings towards him, and that's why he's so angry about the romantic love. Some other people think that he's just a good friend and that he just cares about him in that way. And in the film we'll see one interpretation of this very, very clearly, which is really brought to the fore by things like Mercutio's costuming and his behaviour. But that idea that he is a loyal friend is key both in the play and in the film. It's important to remember that you know, Mercutio is willing to die for Romeo, and that actually is what happens in the play. So that's a really key element of his personality, that he's willing to die for Romeo because he's such a good friend to him. So, the fourth element of Mercutio's character that we're going to talk about is that he is a funny character. He's comedic, and this is really important because obviously the play is a tragedy. Yeah, it's a really sad story. The star-crossed lovers fall in love and then they take their lives. They both die. Now, that's quite difficult to sit through, isn't it? You know, you don't want to sit through 3 hours of misery and sadness without someone being quite funny and someone that you can care about. So the audience cares about Mercutio because he's funny, okay? And that's what makes his death halfway through the play such a key turning point, okay? Because we care, don't we, that he dies, and then that means that his death is more powerful. Now, this is important because Mercutio's death is the first death of the play, really, and it's the first one that the audience go, oh my God, something bad's going to happen, and it makes us realise that it is this tragedy. It is all going to end horribly. Before that, we had a little bit of hope that things were going to sort themselves out, but at Mercutio's death, that is obviously not going to happen, and that's why he's such an important character, because he demonstrates the turning point of the play. His death is the turning point of the play, where it goes from having a little bit of hope and being a romance and being about love to turning into this real, tragic story. So the fifth element of his personality, and the final one that I'm going to talk about today, is something I've just alluded to, and the fact that he is a very violent character. He is very violent, and not just because he's quick to change, not just because he's mercurial, although it does link to that, doesn't it? That he's quick to change and volatile and violent, just like that Mercury in the tube. But he wants a fight. He loves a fight, does Mercutio, and that's really important because there's other characters that love a fight as well, isn't it? It makes him similar to Tybalt, and yet we hate Tybalt. We hate him, don't we? So it makes us feel a little bit mixed feelings about Mercutio. And when he does get very violent in the fight, it does make us think a bit like, oh, you're really aggressive, and that's a bit of a problem for us. But we care so much about him that even when he dies, even though it's sort of his fault because he just pushes himself into this fight, we still really care, and it is really sad.